Hello and welcome to the very first episode of r/Entitled Parents. Coincidentally, this is my very first video on this channel, so hopefully you guys enjoy. And let's get into the very first story. My son is disabled, so he can grab your boobs. I do a lot of work with kids who have learning disabilities, and I've got loads of stories concerning their parents. It really makes me sad when the parents refuse to teach their kids how to behave or discipline them just because they have disabilities. Certainly there are much different criteria for how you would go about doing this, but it's in the child's best interest to learn how to properly interact with other people. There have been several occasions where I've found myself thinking, I'm glad she hit me instead of someone out on the street. Because I've been trained to calmly diffuse the situation if I can, but it's really unsafe to let your child run about grabbing, smacking, screaming at, or kicking strange people, who could very easily react in an equally violent manner. The point of it all is, I understand that the child doesn't know any better, but at some point the parent cannot keep saying, he just doesn't understand, instead of trying to teach their kid why that behavior isn't acceptable or provide an alternative. Anyway, EM equals entitled mother, S equals student. I'm a girl in my late teens, not particularly busty by any means, but I mean, I'm not flat-chested either. One of the boys in a camp I'm helping to teach at is around 14 or 15, and he has pretty severe learning disorder. There are about 10 kids in the group, all with different abilities and needs. In a perfect world, there would be 1 or 2 kids for every counsellor. But there are about 3 or 4 of us, and one is assigned to a particular child who has a habit of running away, often in the direction of an exit or toward a street. S appeared to be pretty attached to me from the get-go, and since it's hard for some of the kids to make friends, I tried to give him as much attention as I could, without ignoring any of the others. I knew from the start, of course, that because of his age, and all of his hormones are starting to kick in, but he doesn't know what to do with them. So, little crushes on the females in this group aren't uncommon. Unfortunately, he hasn't learned about boundaries, it seems, even if he is in his late teens and he could get a little grabby. One particular instance stuck out at when he ran up to me and grabbed my chest and wouldn't let go at my prompting. After I recovered from the initial knee-jerk reaction of, "What are you doing?" I gently took him aside and said something along the lines of, "Instead of grabbing someone, say hello first, or give them a high five," and whatnot. It seemed to work. He greeted me with high fives for the rest of the summer and seemed to comprehend that I hadn't liked being grabbed. However, the teacher and I decided that we should probably let his parents or caretaker know about the incident to keep it from happening again. Enter the entitled mother. I've had conversations like this probably hundreds of times at this point. I spend a lot of my free time with kids like these, often seeing each for maybe a few weeks as they come and go. I've had to tell parents that their kid did anything from punching the instructor to running around or throwing things. And anytime we have to discipline or reprimand a child, we like to keep their parents or caretakers in the loop. Usually I get an apology from the parent, sometimes also from the child, and then we talk about ways we can keep it from happening again. Communication is important because we have to know things like, was the child agitated by something in the environment? Is it an ongoing issue? Could they be acting out because they aren't feeling well or are in pain? At least half of them are nonverbal, so you have to take everything into account. And I say usually because this went down differently. As we're getting everyone loaded up to go home, I pull aside EM just to let her know what happened. At this point, it's not like the incident came as a huge distressing thing. I'm just doing what I usually do. I explain that he grabbed me inappropriately and that we explained to him that he shouldn't do that. And then, of course, the part at the end where you're about to make sure the parent doesn't think I'm mad at them or the child. Before I can even finish, EM starts on a tangent about how her precious little baby didn't know any better and how dare we reprimand him. I say, look, we're not mad at him. This isn't the first time we've had a child do this. He said he was sorry and we've moved on, but I'm just trying to keep her informed. I'm interrupted again by EM scolding me for wearing a V-neck t-shirt that is in no way immodest, saying that I was basically tempting him. I'm kind of panicking at this point because I don't usually get yelled at by parents, especially not for wearing t-shirts. So I tried to wave my boss over while sputtering the typical, "Oh, okay, well sorry, if you think I did something wrong." EM is still acting like I've done something terrible to her child when S comes skipping over, gives me an enthusiastic greeting and a high five, and asks his mom when he's coming back to see me again. I guess this made her pretty angry because she was hoping to be able to keep playing the victim card. After some BS about how I should know that he couldn't control himself and not be in this line of work if I can't handle it, EM and S stomp off. Surprisingly, S kept coming all summer, despite EM's insistence that he was 100% unable to control himself or understand the situation. He stuck to high fives and always asked before he hugged me. One time he went in for a hug, stopped himself, apologized, and then waited for my permission. He obviously learned from the exchange and improved in his social skills throughout the camp. I guess his mother either didn't want to try and work with him to improve his behaviour, or was so worried about his disability that she assumed she couldn't discipline him at all. Our next story is, give me both of the pizzas. My son and I deserve them. So I was in the shop buying pizza for dinner for both my stepbrother and I, because why not? As I arrived at the frozen section to buy one of our favourite kinds of pizzas, only to find there's just 2 left. Just enough for me and my bro. Lucky, right? Wrong. In comes entitled mother and her 14 to 16-year-old son. Entitled mother, excuse me, I was wondering if you could let me take those pizzas. At this point, I didn't realize what I got myself into. She had asked somewhat nicely and I was already carrying some weight, so I thought I'd give my pizza and have something else for dinner while letting my stepbrother have the pizza. So being nice, I offered her one of the 2 boxes. She stood there confused for a few seconds until replying, EM. And the other one? Me. Oh, this one's for me. You can have this one. EM. Excuse me? What is my son supposed to eat? Alarm bells by now were ringing inside my head, warning me that she was some stuck-up wench. Just by her expression alone, I could tell she thought she was better than me. Me, look, I'm offering you one. The other one is for my brother. Take it or leave it. Entitled mother. Well, you should have come in earlier then. They're both mine. Take it or leave it. By this point, I'm still holding on to both pizzas, and I've lost my patience with this jerk. So I turned around while still holding on to the 2 boxes and made a beeline for the checkouts. I did hear her spout some unsavory things behind my back. However, considering that I have got the last 2 pizza boxes, I consider that me, 1, entitled mother, 0. You're going to see a common theme with these stories. I don't know what it is, but it just seems parents think that their kids are more important than everyone else and their kids should receive things. I don't get it. EP wants both our Switch systems? So my girlfriend and I recently got engaged, and rather than telling my parents over the phone, we went up to visit them. It's a long trip from where we live to my parents, about 5 hours, so rather than drive, we booked train tickets. We travelled up there with no issues and had a lovely weekend with my folks, who couldn't be happier about the news. Then came time to return home. We boarded the train, and like with our trip down, the 2 of us had our Nintendo Switches. The first hour was fine. We'd been playing Smash and decided to swap out the Mario Kart. The train was pulling into its next station and a bunch of passengers got on. A woman, entitled parent, mid-late 30s, and her son, entitled child, 6 or 7, sat on the chairs on the other side of the aisle from us. At first, nothing. The train moved on from the station, then a few minutes passed, and I glanced to see that EC is staring at us from his seat. He notices me, and then turns to his mom and shouts, entitled child. Mom, I'm bored. Entitled parent. Did you bring your game like I told you to? Entitled child. No, I forgot. They have games, get me theirs. EP tries to get our attention, at first asking fairly politely if she could borrow one of our Switches. I say sorry, but we're playing them, and I'm not particularly comfortable borrowing my stuff to strangers, and we go back to our game. That's when things turned ugly. EC at this point has started crying and kicking the seat in front of him. Thankfully no one is sitting in it. That's when she starts shouting at us. EP. See what you're doing now? This is your fault. Me. I'm sorry, but how is this my fault? You can't control your kid? GF. Yeah, you should have made sure to pack stuff for him to do if you knew you were bringing him on a long trip. EP. I told him to, but he forgot. Me. Again, not our fault. You should have made sure he had it. You can't expect a little kid to remember to grab stuff. At this point, she was ranting and raving, a lot of which I could barely understand over the kids screaming, but then I did hear EP. Why do people your age even have these games for anyway? You don't need them. If anything, you should be letting us use both of them so I can play with my son. Me. Sorry, but we enjoy these games. One of the reasons we're even traveling by train is an excuse so we can play them together. Now can you please just leave us alone? In this time, I noticed at least one passenger pointed out the confrontation to the conductor, who'd been keeping an eye on the situation but hasn't yet said anything or stepped in. Thankfully, at this time, EP had shut up, and even the EC had started to calm down. At this point, my GF and I had gotten to the point where we couldn't be bothered to continue with Mario Kart. So we both pull out our Switch cases out of our bags, and then proceed to pick what to play next, and deciding to go back to Smash to rid us both of some of the built-up frustration from the encounter. Now this part, I'll admit, I should have seen coming, and was partly my fault for leaving it in a place EC could reach, but he must have seen that I was keeping the case for my Switch, which had all the games I'd brought on the trip, in my rucksack. That was hanging on the arm of my seat because suddenly I felt the bag move and hit my leg a few times. At first I thought it was just the train moving, but as I glanced over, there was EC holding my Switch case, pulling out the carts. Me. Hey, tell him to give that back or I'll come over there and take it. Entitled parent. Don't you dare threaten my son. Me. Your son is a thief. Give it back now, EP. Why? You're not playing these games. Let him look. Me. There are over £500 worth of games in those cases. Giving them now before he loses them. It was at this point the sweetest piece of revenge happened. EC licked one of the Switch carts. He then started to scream in terror. Now for those who don't know, due to the small size of Switch carts, Nintendo coats them in a non-toxic bittering agent known as denatonium benzoate to discourage small children from eating them, and naturally, it tastes awful. EP started screaming about how we'd poisoned her child, and the conductor finally came and stepped in. EP tried to play the victim, saying we'd stolen both of their Switch systems, and then tried to kill her son by poisoning him, and demanded they phone the police, but the conductor wasn't having any of it, as he'd been given the same report by multiple passengers that the mother and son were harassing us. He made her give us back my Switch case and games and made the decision to remove them from the train at the next stop and make her wait for another, all while her kid was still screaming in terror from the awful taste licking the cart had provided. That taste lasts quite a while on your tongue. The rest of the trip was extremely pleasant. The conductor couldn't do enough for us, and at the stop after the one EP and EC were forced to get off at, a mother and her daughter, about 10, sat in the seats behind us. She kept peeking over the seat to watch us play, and my GF said that it was fine if she wanted to watch. She spent the rest of the trip talking to us about our games and what games she played, and because we got to talk with her and get to know her, we actually did share our systems with her, with permission from her mother first. Please parents, raise your kids to be like this awesome young lady. I certainly hope any kids my GF and I have will be like her, and not that annoying EC brat. Alright, that's going to do it for today's stories. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell for all future uploads. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace!